Welcome to the Big Four Accounting Firm podcast, brought to you by big4accountingfirms.com and the Big Four Accounting Firms YouTube channel. In today's podcast, we're going to be discussing a couple of news stories. The first news story is a lawsuit that's coming against Deloitte. It's actually a couple of lawsuits. Now, Deloitte is being sued over work that they performed for the unemployment website in New York. People who filed for unemployment benefits claim that their personal data was leaked. And you have to remember, New York has a lot of unemployment because they're hit the hardest by COVID-19 and their website was overwhelmed and they hired Deloitte to help them out. And people are claiming that information such as social security numbers and home addresses were leaked. And people in Ohio are also suing Deloitte for leaking their information because they use a similar website. And these lawsuits are going to be part of a class action lawsuit against Deloitte. And there was a similar lawsuit in Florida where Deloitte is trying to get the case dismissed, saying they had no fiduciary duty to people applying for benefits. Basically, they're saying they contracted with the state, they didn't contract with individuals. And according to Florida, the system in Florida has been unusable for years, and they've been trying to get Deloitte to fix it. So what I take away from the stories here about Deloitte and the unemployment websites is Deloitte might be getting into areas that they're not familiar with. They might be hiring employees that aren't really sophisticated with this stuff, and partners are getting really big eyes because they see additional revenue from consulting contracts that they can get. But there's obviously something wrong here. If you have multiple lawsuits in multiple states, maybe Deloitte partners need to reassess their risk here because this is a new offering, developing websites for governments. And I know they've done a lot of stuff for governments over the years, but if you're getting multiple lawsuits over this highly private information or information that should be private, then Deloitte needs to reassess their risk. They can say that they have no fiduciary duty all they want, but if their websites that they're helping work on are leaking information, then they need to reassess their risk here, and they probably need to reassess their engagement letters too. But it's something interesting happening here. I mean, they probably won a lot of work with a lot of different states because they probably used that Florida win that they had with the unemployment website to win these other contracts. And now that these are going bad, it seems like there might be something up here. But I think the Big Four in general, as they get into more technology solutions and technology consulting, they need to be careful because they might not have the expertise that they think they have. These are accounting firms, and they're getting into areas that they're not really familiar with. In a more positive news story involving Deloitte, Deloitte is partnering with American Airlines to provide 40,000 pieces of personal protective equipment to frontline healthcare workers. Now, Deloitte had credits from canceled flights due to the coronavirus, probably a lot of credits that their employees had, and Deloitte is just donating those credits to American Airlines so that they can use the money to transport 40,000 medical gowns from China to Mount Sinai Hospital in New York City. Puneet Ranjan, who's the head of Deloitte, had the following to say: "We're grateful to collaborate with American Airlines to help them transport life-saving medical supplies to the hospitals on the front lines of the COVID-19 crisis. Deloitte's purpose is to make an impact that matters. By donating our unused ticket credits, we are able to make a small but meaningful impact to the global fight against this pandemic." So that's some news involving Deloitte. Now let's move on to some news involving Ernst & Young. In other news, E&Y is being sued by the FDIC over a bank failure from 2017. E&Y was the auditor of First NBC Bank in Louisiana, and the lawsuit against Ernst & Young seeks $125 million from E&Y. And this is because there's a lot of fraudulent activity at the bank, and many of the bad actors have been charged with crimes. And the FDIC took over the bank after they failed and has had to sift through the wreckage and figure out what criminal charges are involved, and they're coming after the auditors last. And Ernst & Young feels like they've done nothing wrong, but FDIC believes that they should have been able to detect some of the fraud, and some of the controls that E&Y signed off should have been able to detect this. And there was someone at the bank that was funneling money to poor performing loans to make them seem like they were being paid off. And the FDIC said this wasn't detected because E&Y did not test the controls properly. And there's other fraudulent activities going on. There's some bad loans that were made. And a lot of this, the FDIC believes that E&Y should be held accountable for. So it'll be interesting to see what comes of that. Most likely there will be a settlement because there's probably going to be some kind of work paper or something that comes up from this that doesn't look good. And there's just probably some control that E&Y should have done some more testing around, or there's something that they should have done. So I don't know if the E&Y will pay the full $125 million, but I'm sure they'll settle with the FDIC just to get this over with. So that's the news for today. Thanks for listening. Make sure to subscribe to this podcast and subscribe to our YouTube channel.